Field Trip Friday! So today we're coming at you guys live at the Manoa Chocolate Factory. We met a couple that live in Hawaii who want to grow sustainably, have business that's sustainable, and also help farmers and even start their own farm. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video. You get a lot of good nuggets.
And if you want to know and you like chocolate, you'll know everything you want to know about chocolate, and it is awesome.
Don't move. Here we go.
Okay, so the story of our business, Manoa Chocolate Hawaii, begins at the University of Hawaii. So my husband Dylan, who's the chocolate maker, founder, and business owner, he actually grew up in this town, Kailua town, here on the east side of Oahu. He was born and raised here. And he went to Kalaheo and then UH. At UH, he was kind of scratching his head trying to figure out what kind of industry or business he could start, industry he could be a part of, or business he could start that we could give back to our islands. A lot of times people who grow up here, they feel like they need to leave to find opportunity, but we were really dedicated about doing something here in Island. And he was looking at sustainable forest management. We both have backgrounds in sustainable business, so just the cross-section of plants, people, and profits, so you can make money but also take care of the world and people. And just everything clicked when it came to understanding the potential for chocolate in Hawaii. It just so happened that as he was 6 months prior to graduation, he became friends with somebody whose job it was to study cacao for the university. So in 2005, there was a research project at the College of Tropical Ag where a professor had planted different genetics in various microclimates throughout the state. And then a young man named Dan O'Doherty got the job to study the crop and to learn everything about chocolate, because farmers started calling in and saying, well, why is this pod green and why is this pod yellow and what do I do with it and how do I make chocolate? So his job was to be able to answer those questions and become a local expert. Dylan, my husband, was invited into labs with his buddy Dan, and there they would make chocolate on a small scale. And that's where Dylan learned about all of the research and new farms that were getting started and this bean to bar movement. And we realized that some of the farmers got it as far as fermented and dried seed, but some of our early harvests were being sent to California for processing at that time. And we said, hey, we need to start a chocolate factory. That's like being in wine country with vineyards everywhere and no wineries. There were a few other winery or chocolate factories, I should say, that were already established that kind of paved the way for us. But there's a lot of room for all of us to grow, and together we want to position Hawaii as a place for both quality chocolate and quality making. And so we're here to work with the farmers, whether through private label manufacturing or purchasing of beans, to just be a local maker so that we can close the loop on the farming side to do the manufacturing here in Hawaii. We're in the tasting room and actually our chocolate factory. We make everything here from bean to bar. So bean, these are cacao beans, all the way to the dark chocolate bars. So here's the dark chocolate bars, bean to bar. So we represent a new style of American craft chocolate, sort of like the switch between industrial beer, mass-produced beer, down to microbreweries. So it's a style that's up and coming, and it's very different than the Swiss, Belgian, German style chocolate. So, you know, these regions that are known for their chocolate, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, they're just referring to where it's made, and they have a certain style, milky, creamy, whereas in the United States, and now it's all over the world, bean to bar is about labeling where the chocolate comes from when you taste it and talking about it like we would enjoy a nice wine. So even if we're not wine drinkers, we can appreciate the terroir from different regions around the world that we bring in-house. And we start from scratch all the way through the manufacturing process. So you're gonna learn that today. Hawaii is the only state in the United States that can grow chocolate, and so we're really excited about sharing bean to bar, the idea of labeling place, making chocolate from scratch, and then empowering local farmers to get in the game here in Hawaii. Hawaii is growing chocolate on every island, and down here you can see there's 2 very healthy cacao trees. So that's from our team enjoying the fruit and starting a little forest. We just want people to see what the trees look like. Here we're not growing cacao, we are makers, so that means we work with the farmers. These are the big burlap sacks of beans that we bring in, and we start with the raw dried seed. So this is the gallery wall where we're going to talk a little bit about how the chocolate is, you know, everything that happens on the farm before we even receive the dried seed, which is actually the most important part, because for us what we want to see is agriculture here in Hawaii. So let's appreciate the farming side. This is real. This is a cacao fruit. It's usually about the size of a football. Yeah.
Yep.
And they come in different colors, shapes, sizes, grooves, textures. This is the way they grow off of the main trunk and branches. They're almost like papayas. And so they're cauliflowers. So the tree is called Theobroma cacao, and it loves the understory of the rainforest. This is a look at the flower here. It gets pollinated by a local midge, which is a tiny little, kind of like a microscopic fruit fly, and it's endemic to Hawaii. You can see it go from tiny, like dried flower to little bud called chirelle. It's going to be 4 years until, on average, until it gets its first fruit. And then once it's pollinated, it's going to take about 6 months until it's the size we saw. And there's different types, different grooves and textures. Some are round like pumpkin, some are oblong. And then inside is the chocolate. So there's about 30 to 60 seeds. And I actually have one that's in season today. You guys ready to see one of the weirdest fruits you'll ever see?
That's interesting.
Isn't that bizarre? So there's a cluster of 30 to 60 seeds inside each of the pods, and there's a delicious sweet pulp surrounding the dark purple seed. So what we can do is you can actually try it. I'm gonna offer you a sample.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's actually really good. It looks kind of gross, but it's absolutely delicious.
You know what's inside.
It tastes like lychee. So the fruit surrounding the bean is sweet and sour, and it's like a pulpy juice. So what you want to do is suck the fruit off and don't chew or bite into the inner seed inside. The seed underneath is the cocoa bean, but the fruit is what we're interested in right now. And then I'm going to hand you guys a napkin. And what you can do is take your 2 front teeth and bite through the center and look at the other half and see the color inside. Half is this beautiful dark purple.
It matches your shirt.
Yeah. And if you can kind of taste it with the tip of your tongue, you'll notice it's bitter. But that's where you get all of your chocolate flavor. So the seed itself is the cacao bean. We call them beans, but they're actually the seeds of this tropical fruit. And then you can go ahead and spit out the rest if you don't want to eat it all.
Oh no, I'm into bitter.
If you want to eat it, it's actually really healthy for you.
I love it.
Yeah, it's loaded with antioxidants, magnesium, and iron, so it's actually really good for you. Okay, so that's the fruit.
Because it is one of the world's healthiest.
It has the most magnesium and iron than any other plant in nature. It's loaded with antioxidants. And there's not a lot of caffeine. The most caffeine is in this form with it raw, but through the processing of chocolate, you actually lose a lot of the caffeine. So there's a different chemical, which is kind of like a happy chemical. It's a similar molecular structure to caffeine, but a little bit different, and it kind of gives you a mood lift and kind of the feelings you get when you give somebody a hug.
Sure.
Serotonin.
So would you say the cacao bean has more caffeine than a coffee bean?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Very little caffeine compared to coffee. Yeah, so not as much as people think. So now that we've tasted that fruit, the next step is actually the most important step in fine flavored chocolate. So we're a bean to bar maker. What we care about is paying farmers properly for their work. So a lot of people don't know that the vast majority of beans that enter the global market and end up in candy like Snickers and Hershey's and even some of the finer brands that you would think of quality, they may not necessarily be sourcing socially responsibly, or they might have a supply chain that is so vast that they may not know the original source where it came from. So American craft chocolate bean to bar is about having a direct supply chain and knowing exactly where your beans come from and paying farmers properly. So a lot of the chocolate in the world is coming from West Africa, and you're going to get a lot of social issues if you don't know exactly where it's coming from. So in other words, rather than going through many brokers, out of sight, out of mind, we are making sure that all of our farmers are paid properly. Now, in order to pay high prices, we also get a better quality bean because the farmers do such a great job fermenting. So this is the next step. When we talk about fine flavored chocolate, what happens is you need a critical mass. At least, you want several hundred pods all ripe with peak sugar at the same time. And then you're going to scoop out the wet seed.
Oh, quick question.
Yeah.
When they ripen, do they ripen on the tree, or do you need to take them off to finish ripening?
They ripen on the tree, so you'll have to know what to look for. So some pods go from like this deep green to bright yellow, and some pods go from sort of this like deep maroon to bright orange. So you might have an orchard with many different genetics mixed, and you might have to groom your orchard and pick only the ripe ones at that given time, and you might have 2 to 4 harvests in your orchard per season, because you want to deal with peak sugar, peak ripeness. And then once you have enough, you're going to scoop out all the contents, the wet seed and the bean inside. It's going to go into a series of wooden boxes. So it's just the sweet pulp. What's going to happen is there's wild yeast and bacteria in that particular microclimate, and it's going to start to spontaneously ferment. So all the yeast on your hands are in the box and in the air on the leaves. You're going to start to eat the sugars. And
So what are you covering it with? What kind
we
of
do
leaves?
like banana leaves typically. If you're in Hawaii, you can do tea leaves, any kind of local leaf in the area, and sometimes burlap. And that's just to keep the initial heat in.
Sure.
And that's why you want the critical mass. Is the sugars are going to start getting eaten up by the yeast, and everything in the pile is going to spike in temperature. So that's why you have these temperature loggers in here. And hopefully on day 1, day 2 maybe, you're going to hit up to about 110 degrees. So it's going to naturally get hot, and so you want to keep that heat in. And what's happening is it's almost like, just to oversimplify it, like the beans are stewing in their own sweet pulp. And the pulp that we enjoyed just now, that's like the marinade.
Sure.
And as everything's cooking and getting hot, you're going to have to watch the pile and introduce oxygen by moving it from one box to the next. So it's very much an art on the farming side. And then what's going to happen is the beans kind of change color, and the fruit pulp sort of cooks off, and all the while the beans are almost chemically changing from harsh and bitter to subtle tones and more balance coming through. And then after about a week, it's like 5 to 7 day process, depending on the humidity. They're going to be laid out in the sun to dry. So this is where we come in. So you can see here the fermented dried seed, sun dried, and then we get it direct trade in big burlap sacks.
And so how long will they sun dry?
1 to 2 weeks.
1 to 2 weeks.
As long as it's thoroughly sun dried. You don't want to get it moldy. You don't want to have a lot of surface mold. So sometimes drying in the tropics is one of the most difficult parts, but it's very important extension of the fermentation process. So when we're talking about socially responsible direct trade chocolate, we're getting also really quality beans, and so the farmers, they're also earning this higher price because they're doing such a great job on the farm. And as a maker of our style, we're not going to be trying to doctor up the chocolate by adding lots of milk and other things. We really just want to taste the quality of the bean, and in order to do that, they have to do a great job on the farming side.
So you get a lot of these cacao beans from all over. So just a different flavor from different regions,
exactly
right?
the point, yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So our whole passion is to bring in beans from around the world, teach people about where chocolate is growing and the stories behind those farmers, and then allow them to taste that place, which is the natural qualities of the bean that we've imported. And we want to get people chocolate literate in Hawaii and all of our visitors from around the world, so that they're ready for when more local farmers start to enter the game.
Sure.
We'll be able to not only taste the different islands, but our sub-regions and our specific valleys, our Ahupua'a system. So we really just want to develop a passion for tasting the chocolate itself. And this is the whole reason why Hawaii is starting to grow chocolate really as a serious industry for the first time. Before, people wanted candy. They didn't care where the chocolate came from. And now within this context of bean to bar and tasting region, Hawaii has an opportunity to become known as one of the fine regions of cacao in the world.
So it's like, you're trying to educate people. It's like people are wine connoisseurs of chocolate, right?
Exactly. It's the same concept, but this time more people can enjoy it.
Sure.
Exactly. We just talked about the farming side, the post-harvest handling, fermentation and drying, and how it's important for the farmers to do a beautiful job there in order to bring out the flavors of the bean, and we're able to pay the farmers a really high price, far above fair trade, because we're doing direct trade. So we know our farmers, and then we tell their stories. Once we bring in the dried seed, the first thing we do is taste the beans raw, like a sommelier would sip a bottle of wine. So if the fermentation went really well, it'll taste like a sunflower seed. It might have tones of cherries. If it doesn't go well, it would be like eating bark that was like thrown in a fire. So really woody and harsh. But we're looking for subtle qualities. And then from there, we will go to behind you is a coffee roaster. So this coffee roaster is a huge upgrade from how we started. Here we can roast 25 pounds at a time. When we first began our chocolate factory, before we had this lovely facility, we were making chocolate, R&D in Mom's Kitchen around the corner here in Kailua Town, you know, at their house by the beach. We took a barbecue and converted it. We took a drum roaster and started rolling the beans over the fire. You know, any way to evenly roast a bean is ideal. So you don't want to have them in a convection oven, for example, which is right here. We did that for about maybe like a year and a half before we scored this coffee roaster. And there it's really tedious. You have to have trays and like roll the beans every 5 minutes so that you don't over roast one side versus the other, whereas here they can evenly roast. So we've come a long way. But just to give you guys a comparison, like a small industrial factory might roast 3 tons at a time. We roast 25 pounds tons at a time, so we can get a lot more control.
So I see we're in the library.
We have here our cacao bean library. The shelf is all of the samples of local farms that we've tasted over the years. And some of the early harvests were not ideal, but then we work with farmers and we talk about what we're looking for as a buyer or as a maker. And then they've gotten better and better. We have like a bean evaluation service for local growers. And then the bottom shelf here, we've got samples of many different regions around the world. So we have here Colombia, Tanzania, Ecuador, Papua New Guinea. So we have a point of reference for appreciating Hawaiian chocolate as well. Also, we want Hawaii to be known not just for our growing of cacao, we want to be known for quality cacao on the farming side as well as the making side. So it behooves us as a local factory to be an expert in beans from all over the world. This is a raw bean sourced from Tanzania, Cocoa Camellia, the Kilombero Valley. The fact that I could deshell it easily means that it was a great ferment. And go ahead and try it raw. Just a little piece. And it's like eating a nut, but you might notice that there's subtle tones in there. What does it kind of taste like to you? I mean, even with that, you don't have to be an expert to pick up on some of this stuff. It's like really fruity.
Oh, yeah, definitely the raw cacao, right.
No, so this is a really fruity, bright.
And a lot of times I've had the raw cacao and it has more of a bitter taste. This does not have this at all.
Right, and this isn't even roasted yet. So it's like very tart and fruity, and it has like a little bit of a smoky kind of tobacco tone. It's really good. It's like balanced and fruity. And then this next one is from Esmeraldas, Ecuador. And this is a really great family-owned farm in the northwest coast of Ecuador. So this is raw, and yet I can crack it open easily. Inside is the cacao bean or nibs, but these are before roasting. So we taste it raw to evaluate its flavor. We just had Tanzania, now we're having Esmeraldas, Ecuador. This one's far more nutty.
Yes.
Not bitter though.
And even kind of smoky.
It has like a floral kind of herbaceous, but even a little fruit.
No, you're right. It is. Now I can taste it. The longer.
A little bit.
The herbs.
Later.
That herb taste.
Yeah, so they're going to be very different chocolates.
Yes.
As a result of the winnowing process, we actually get 3 different distinct products. The large shells become this lovely loose leaf tea, so nothing goes to waste. The pure chocolate bean itself, those are known as cacao nibs, so we bag some of that up just for people to enjoy in cooking as a nut alternative, and they're loaded with magnesium, iron, and antioxidants. They're great as a garnish in all kinds of cooking, and especially on yogurt and smoothies and acai bowls. And then we actually sift out all these little bits, the fines, which is a little bit of nibs and shells, and that becomes something known as brewing chocolate, which has this sort of texture, almost like coffee grounds. And that you can put in a French press or a coffee percolator, and it's like a coffee alternative without the caffeine. Isn't that cool? You can also use it as like a rub or a spice, and even brew it really dark, and then broil meats and use it like a marinade. This is the second to last step in the chocolate making process, which we've talked about sourcing, roasting, winnowing, and now we're going to take the nibs and put them into our stone grinder. And this is how a lot of bean to bar makers started, with what's called the cocoa town, and they were originally used as Indian spice grinders. We realized we can use them for making chocolate on a small scale. So what you're about to see is the nibs loaded into the machine, and when the stone wheels that are spinning crush against the stone base, what happens is all the natural oil inside the cacao bean are going to the nibs themselves are going to emulsify from the natural oil in the bean. So it starts out as a crunchy nut, sort of like texture, and then it transforms into what's known as a chocolate liquor. And you can kind of see the stone wheels there. It takes about 20 minutes, and we slowly load the nibs so that we don't, kind of overpower the motor. And the first like 10-15 minutes, it looks like a nut butter. And after about 25-30 minutes, it's a smooth, what we call chocolate liquor. Nothing to do with alcohol, it just means the form of the chocolate from nibs into an emulsified version, just from the natural oil in the bean. So once we load the nibs in there, we're going to add a little bit of sugar, an organic pure cane sugar. And what makes the bean to bar craft chocolate style sort of distinct from Belgian, Swiss, German style or industrial chocolate is the fact that we don't want to add anything else in there besides the organic pure cane sugar. So you're just tasting the bean from that particular place and the way we roasted it, plus a little bit of sugar to carry the flavor, almost like adding some salt to food. It kind of carries all the subtle tones. Of course, we can make milk chocolate if we want to. We would just add dehydrated milk powder straight into the grinder because you're working with the oil, so you don't want to add any liquids. So this would be like our kitchen. If I'm adding an ingredient, I would put it in here. So when we go to our tasting after, we're going to have two types of chocolate. One is single origin, where we're just tasting the bean and the sugar and nothing else. And the other is, having fun with what we call dark milk chocolate. So they're still dark. We're going to do like 50 to 60% cacao, and have some milk chocolates and fun flavors added. So those are known as inclusions. I guess we should talk about one more step, and that's tempering and molding. So here we have our chocolate molds. And after we add the sugar crystals, the chocolate grinders in this form are actually going to spin for 3 to 4 days straight until the sugar crystals are refined enough so that we don't have a gritty texture on our palate. And then we're going to raise and lower the temperature of the chocolate a series of times before we pull them into the molds. So when they do harden, they'll have a beautiful shine and a clean snap, and the cocoa butter crystals will form into a grid. So we won't get into all of those details, but that's what's happening when pastry chefs are putting chocolate on the marble slabs. They're structuring the cacao butter so that it has a nice temper and it holds its form up to like over 90 degrees. So because you guys are Homestead homies, we want to thank you for watching and offer you guys 20% off our website. So we have an online store, manoachocolate.com. You can order really beautiful gifts and boxes of chocolate or nibs, health nibs for the holidays. It's only $10 flat rate for us to ship anywhere in the US, and you can also specify a handwritten note. We'll write it out for you. If you write GET20, GET20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off the standard 50-gram bars. Aloha.
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video of us at the chocolate factory. There was no golden tickets in any of our candy bars, but we were able to learn about sustainably growing cacao and turning it into an end product that people can enjoy all over the world.
And it tasted delicious. I learned so much. This was one of my favorite things I've done when we've been here in Oahu.
She's easy to please, but she did get a lot of chocolate.
It was great. It was a wonderful experience. So wonderful.
Yeah. So, as always, thanks for watching our videos. We appreciate you guys watching, and don't forget you can check us out on the next video. So we're out of here. We gotta go do some more surfing and hanging out at the beach.
So give us a big thumbs up on this Field Trip Friday, because I am giving it 2 thumbs up.
And also leave a comment down below if you never even knew where chocolate came from.